Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and thank you for your statement, Cabinet Secretary. Recent testing reports have noted that in terms of quality leadership in schools, there has been a lack of succession planning, a limited of well-tailored professional development opportunities for senior and middle-level leaders and teachers, and school leadership is not being considered an attractive profession. Estin inspections identified only a small number of schools as having excellent practice in leadership and planning for improvement. I'm sure these statements are not news to you. You've acted on them to create the academy, and I welcome the creation of that academy because, you know, its focus on developing and supporting leadership is a good step. However, this broad welcome must come with some caveats. Any initiatives must be cost-effective and also effective in terms of the results that they deliver. In terms of ensuring effectiveness, I very much welcome the appointment of former Chief Inspector of Schools, Anne Keane, to, amongst other things, oversee the instigation of the Academy. Anne has a great breadth of experience acquired from working as a teacher herself, including schools in England. She's also delivered extremely detailed and helpful material during her time with Estin. In terms of funding and cost, Estin's Roadshow report in October 2017 stated that there was uncertainty around whether the Academy can have sufficient leverage without managing all leadership development funding. So that's one thing that I would like to ask you, how is that funding going to be managed and how is it going to be controlled? The attendees were concerned about sufficient funding for leadership development and suitable management of it. However, on the other hand, there's also a concern about taxpayers receiving value for money and the costs of the Academy being proportionate. We don't want funding of this programme to take significant funding away from frontline teaching services, and I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary would agree with me on that. The Cabinet Secretary discusses the need for the Academy to have a big online presence. What are the forecast costs associated with achieving the online presence the Cabinet Secretary has in mind? And I'd also like to ask the Cabinet Secretary what mechanisms of scrutiny and review does she have in place to ensure that the costs associated with the National Academy for Educational Leadership remain proportionate and deliver value for money. A concern that's also been raised is the relatively few number of women in senior leadership roles in the education system, which is surprising given the number of women who actually go into teaching. Will the Academy address this, and how do you see the Academy addressing it? It's also intended that the Academy endorses provision from providers. I'm assuming that you mean there that, you know, it's going to be training, professional development, etc. I think that it is a good idea. It makes sense. But how is she going to ensure that leaders and teachers wishing to take advantage of that provision have the time to make the most of them? And how are you going to ensure that leaders and teachers have the time out of their working day to develop their leadership skills? Or is this something that they're going to be expected to do in their personal hours, as is so often the case with CPD? Thank you.
The Secretary.
Can I thank Michelle Brown for her observations. It's important for members to understand the way in which the Leadership Academy has been set up as a company limited by a guarantee, which is arm's length from the Welsh Government, because I wanted to be able to create some kind of independence on a day-to-day operational basis from Welsh Government. We announced last week that the organisation will be led by a new Chief Executive, Hugh Foster-Evans. Hugh is somebody that will be known to many people here as a started his career as a classroom maths teacher, moved up through the ranks, has been a head teacher, understands very well the workings of regional consortia, local education authority, and is extremely enthusiastic with regards to the potential for leadership. And having spoken to him following his appointment, he sees leadership being the core on which we will deliver our educational reforms. The board has an independently appointed chair, as well as a number of board members, all of whom have a recent experience in business and in education that will oversee the day-to-day running of the Academy. And I expect to receive regular reports from both the chair and the Chief Executive about the work. And of course, I'm sure members here, as you are a member of the Children and Young People's Committee, that the committee itself will want to have an in-depth look at the work of the Academy and will want to meet those personnel. An invitation was issued, I believe, for people to come along to the event last week, so people could have met at the official launch. I know people's diaries are incredibly busy over lunchtime, and that's almost impossible. Clear was there. And I hope, Clear, that you would say to colleagues who weren't able to attend, there was a real sense of excitement and anticipation and enthusiasm for what we are doing. Equality issues in education are really, really important ones, Michelle. It's really interesting. You say about lack of female leadership roles. Well, many of the head teachers I meet in leadership roles, head teachers of schools, especially in the primary sector, are female, and that reflects the nature of the primary school workforce. But you know, we need to see greater diversity in our teaching profession across the piece. I want those at the front of our classroom to reflect the nature of the classroom itself, and we are a diverse community with a diverse population, and I would like to see a greater diversity in the teaching profession. And of course the Leadership Academy, I'm sure, will want to give advice to me about what needs to happen if we're to encourage that diversity and we're able to take action with that. Again, one of the things I expect the Leadership Academy to do is to feed into public policy advice, to give advice to me as the Minister about what more we need to do to support the very premise that you painted, a diverse, successful and a set of school leaders and a school leadership system that people aspire to be a part of. They want to be a part of that system rather than seeing leadership as a career-ending opportunity rather than a career-enhancing opportunity. So that's very important to me, that we get that diversity. The usual accountability and assurance measures will be put in place. And the Chief Executive and the Board will be held publicly accountable for the way in which the budget of the organisation is spent. As I said in answer to Llywelyn Hughes-Griffiths, as we approach September, we will be in a position to give greater detail to members about the new National Professional Learning programme that is available. We're already working very, very hard with the OECD to develop our system of schools as learning organisations. And we have to recognise that the old ways of doing professional learning, which often involve coming out of your classroom for an entire day, coming to sit in a hall, being lectured at by the sage on the stage, and then going back to your classroom and having no impact on your practice, those days are over. Often the very best professional learning opportunities come when the children are actually in the room. They come by liaising, not with another school, but actually with your colleagues within school, or having the opportunity to work across a cluster. And our new National Professional Learning Opportunity Programme will reflect that when we're launching it in the autumn.
Thank you. John Griffiths.